And the United States, long an energy-dependent nation, may, within the next 10 years actually, turn into the world's largest energy producer thanks to the current boom that's going on here. And that, of course, will have ramifications for the United States economy, global economy, geopolitics, military strategy, really everything. There's a big story here today in the Wall Street Journal. Good morning, everyone. This is the Markets Hub. I'm Paul Vigna, joined by Liam Denning to talk about this one.
Hi.
So this was based on a report from the EIA, right?
Yeah. The IEA, the International Energy Agency.
I got a little dyslexic there for a second.
They produce this World Energy Outlook once a year. It takes projections out 20 years or so. It's basically their kind of grand picture of where the world's going in energy terms.
And I mean, the oil boom here in the United States is not necessarily new. It's been going on for some time now.
Yeah.
But is this an unexpected turn?
I think it will come as a surprise still to a lot of Americans to read that headline that by 2020 the IEA is projecting that America will be the world's biggest producer of oil. Right. By the way, looking at their longer projections, that isn't expected to last very long. Saudi Arabia will reassert itself in the 2020s. But I think that will surprise people. I think what's important about this report is that it really confirms a lot of things. For example, only last week, OPEC put out its own medium-term report, and it was broadly saying the same thing, you know, that the shale boom is real, North American oil production is rising, and, you know, coming alongside some of the real things we've seen in terms of, for example, North Dakota oil production surging, we do need to get used to this big shift in the world, which is, if you think about it, for the past 3 or 4 decades, we've had a world in which the US has become steadily more and more energy dependent. That's had big implications for the economy, for global geopolitics, and now that's shifting back, and it will have equally important shifts.
Yeah, I mean, this was an issue in the election. I mean, this is one of Mitt Romney's promises, right, that it would make the U.S. energy independent. Right. Looks like it might happen even though he isn't here, which is very interesting. Explain to us this whole shale thing. I think a lot of people still don't quite understand it.
So if you think about it, most of the world's oil that we're used to seeing is essentially big pools of oil under the ground in big caves. You kind of pop a straw in it and the oil comes up. Shale oil really refers to what's called tight oil, which is basically these deeper layers of rock where the oil is trapped in smaller quantities among tight rocks. And what you have to do is break them apart. And that's why you use things like hydraulic fracturing, which is essentially pumping liquids down at high pressure. It fractures the rock and it allows the oil to seep up to the ground.
Now, are these... So I understand that these are new technologies that they developed to get to this oil. Are the technologies, is all this dependent on high oil prices, my real question? I mean, oil prices have been high for a few years now. If the oil prices were to come back down, if the price of a gallon of crude was to drop to $50 a barrel, something like that, do these processes become unprofitable, and does this whole thing unwind, or is that not how it is?
Well, I don't think it unwinds that quickly. I mean, yes, you know, prices have an effect. If the price comes down, then a lot of fields that people are pumping money into now, for example, you know, some of the higher cost shale fields really need a price of around $80 or $90 a barrel. But for a lot of the others, the price has been coming down, and part of this is the effect of once you do something to scale and you learn and you climb that learning curve, the costs do start to come down. But undoubtedly, yes, if prices came down, you would see fields become uneconomic. Some companies would likely go bust, and you know, oil production would come down over time, but it doesn't turn that quickly. I mean, if you've already pumped money into developing a field, if you're kind of 3 or 4 years into doing that, you don't just switch it off.
Yeah. Does energy become a leading growth sector for the U.S. economy in the next 8-10 years?
I absolutely think so. I mean, we're already seeing the impact spreading out to other industries. For example, we're seeing companies like Dow Chemical, Royal Dutch Shell, talking about reopening or even building new petrochemical plants, which make use of natural gas liquids, and the fact that those are a lot cheaper here than around the world. So we're seeing that. We've seen big developments in the steel industry with companies like Nucor talking about new facilities. I mean, if you think about steel, I mean, new steel facilities in the US, I mean, that seems like something that happened 30 or 40 years ago. So we're going to see that. There's also, I think, going to be a big shift in global geopolitics as a result of this. You know, essentially, we're going to go from a world in which the US was the biggest oil consumer and was very dependent on getting a lot of oil out of places like Africa, the Middle East, to feed it. Now we're actually shifting to a world in which the biggest oil consumer sometime around the 2020s, 2030s is going to be China. And like the US, as it was several years ago, very dependent on imports. And that has big implications because we still live in a world where essentially we rely on the US Navy to facilitate free trade. It keeps the sea lanes safe. China doesn't have a navy of that sort. It's trying to build it, but it will be very interesting to see how China copes with a world in which it's becoming more oil dependent and by definition is becoming more dependent on the protection of the US Navy.
Twisted.
Yeah.
All right, Liam Denning, thank you very much, sir.